The Patriot is a dramatic monologue of a man who is being led to the gallows recounting his tale. It's a reminder that life is uncertain, a lesson COVID-19 taught us. It depicts the fickle nature of the crowd. The darling of the people today becomes the most hated person the following day. The poem begins in a reflective tone as a speaker looks back at the events of a year ago. The opening line of the poem drags us straight into the middle of his narrative. It was roses, roses all the way, with myrtle mixed in my path like mad. The house roofs seemed to heave and sway. The church spires flamed, such flags they had, a year ago on this very day. Roses and myrtles are flowers that symbolize love and peace. Myrtle is a sweet-smelling white flower. Now note the visual imagery presented to us here. When we read the lines, a picture of our patriot walking down the path with teeming millions on either side, strewing his path with roses and myrtles, leaps up in our minds. Roses is a metaphor for the celebratory attitude of the people. The poetic device alliteration in roses and myrtle mixed should not be missed out. The third line, the image of housetops heaving and swaying under the weight of the multitude, is a personification. The house roofs are personified here. The people are crowded on top of the house and they are celebrating the arrival of the patriot. And the turrets of the church, decorated with colorful flags, seem to be flaming. And then comes the important line. A year ago, on this very day, underline it. This is the line which reveals that the speaker is reminiscing about those golden days when he basked in the adulation of the crowds. In the first stanza, we saw how the patriot was greeted by the people. Roses and myrtles were strewn on the path. People gathered on the house roofs to have a glimpse of the hero. The church spires were decorated with decorative flags, and the waving flags gave the impression that it was on fire, which is a metaphor. The church spires flamed is a metaphor. The second stanza adds on to the celebratory mood of the reception received by the patriot. The air broke into a mist with bells. The old walls rocked with the crowd and cries. Had I said, "Good folk, mere noise repels, but give me your son from yonder skies," they had answered, and afterward what else? The air broke into a mist with bells. The auditory imagery is used here. Auditory imagery means the imagery connected with a sound. Here, these lines brings to us the sound of church bells. Mist means tiny droplets of water in the atmosphere, but here mist means the sound of bells covering the atmosphere. The church bells were rung as a token of their love and respect. The old walls rocked, reverberated with the hue and cry of the crowd. The whole atmosphere echoed the joy of the crowd. At this point, the speaker feels so heady, that is, the power gets into his head. He is overconfident of the power he possesses to control the reaction of the crowd, that he says, "Good folk, mere noise is disturbing. More than your cries, I would appreciate your son." He says, "I would appreciate if you give me your son." He says that he could have demanded for the impossible. The people would have granted him and asked what else he desired. The figure of speech used here is hyperbole. Demanding a son, giving a son, all these are exaggerated situations. And he asked the men for the son as it is the ultimate symbol of power. And he is confident that the people would have given him even that. Let's go through the welcoming of the patriot once more. 4 points. Roses and myrtles were flung to greet him. People gathered on housetops, walls, and on either side of the path to cheer him. Church spires were decorated with flags. Church bells were rung. People were eager to please him. Says who? Says the Patriot. It's the Patriot himself who is speaking to us about his past a year ago. It is his perception of the events. It is his view that we are listening to. The third stanza comes as a complete contrast. We are taken aback suddenly by that word alak, which means alas. We wonder what happened. The alak conveys the speaker's sense of regret and realization. Alak, it was I who leaped at the sun to give it to my loving friends to keep. Not man could do have I left undone. And you see my harvest, what I reap? This very day, now a year is run. It was I who leaped at the sun. Hyperbole, exaggeration. Nobody can leap at the sun. The speaker realizes that he had overreached himself. This line reminds us the myth of Icarus. In Greek mythology, Icarus was a son of Daedalus. Daedalus had been imprisoned by King Minos of Crete within the walls of his own invention, the labyrinth. Do you know what a labyrinth is? It's a maze, a network of passages in which it is difficult to find one's way. The master craftsman, Daedalus, would not suffer captivity. He made 2 pairs of wings by fixing feathers to a wooden frame with wax. Giving 1 pair to his son, he cautioned him that flying too near the sun would cause the wax to melt. But Icarus became excited with the ability to fly and forgot his father's warning. The feather came loose and Icarus plunged to his death in the sea. Back to the Patriot. When he says it was I who leaped at the sun, he admits that he overreached and did the impossible, not for himself but for his friends. He must be a real patriot. His deeds were not for himself but for others. He continues that he had done whatever could be done and now he is reaping the consequences of his action. He takes the blame. Though he justifies himself by saying he did not leave anything undone and that he did it for friends, he realizes he had drunk the wine of fame and success and hence suffering for his arrogance. He sowed overconfidence and reaped sorrow. The figure of speech used here is metaphor. Harvest stands for his deeds and reaping stands for consequences. The speaker ends with the time factor, a year has run, and brings us to the present. Let me do a quick recap. We saw the glory enjoyed by the Patriot. He described to us his grand welcome and his regret in the third stanza. We are introduced to his present condition in the fourth stanza. There's nobody on the housetops now, just a palsied few at the windows sit. For the best of the sight is all allow at the shambles gate, or better yet, by the very scaffold's foot, I trow. The speaker is being led to the shambles gate. The speaker was about to be hanged, and the people are gathered at the shambles gate to watch the public hanging. The scaffold means the contraption for hanging. The housetops, which were packed a year ago to have a glimpse of the speaker, is now empty. Only a palsied few who are unable to move about are at the windows. Palsied means paralyzed ones. Where do you think the crowd had gone? Speaker thinks that they are at the shambles gate to watch the hanging, the line, at the shambles gate, or better yet, by the very scaffolds I trow. Trow means think. The crowd loves to watch tragedies. You know how the people surge in to watch the near and dear ones crying for funerals? If it was now, the people would have been vying with each other to capture the hanging in mobile phone. The literary device used in this stanza is juxtaposition, the contrasting imagery, the fact that 2 things being seen with contrasting effect is juxtaposition. The image projected in the first stanza is juxtaposed with the current scenario. Rooftops swaying with people in the first stanza and empty rooftops in the fourth stanza works to create a contrast, which is the central idea of the poem. I go in the rain, and more than needs, a rope cuts both my wrists behind, and I think by the feel my forehead bleeds. For they fling, whoever has a mind, stones at me for my years' misdeeds. It's now raining. Rain is the symbol of many things. The speaker gets wet in the rain, losing his dignity. It can also be said that the rain washes him clean, representing his innocence. Rain works to create a tense atmosphere. Rain is attributed human feelings. Pathetic fallacy is used here. Pathetic fallacy is attribution of human feelings to inanimate things or animals. The dull, depressing weather echoes the pathos of the scene. Earlier he was welcomed with roses, now they are throwing stones at him. His forehead is bleeding and he can feel the blood flowing. A rope cuts into his wrists, which are tied behind him. The line indicates to us the extent of the speaker's downfall. It's interesting to note that speaker mentions misdeeds. We are never told the reason for speaker's execution. By the description, we come to know that the public no longer loves or respects him. We wonder what is the reason. Has the speaker really turned a traitor? Or is he a victim of political machination? The line for years' misdeeds makes us ponder deeply if this is the admission of the speaker or the perception of the people. Thus, the poem runs on certain levels of ambiguity. In the last stanza, the speaker himself contrasts his past and the present in the first line. Thus I entered, and thus I go. In triumphs, people have dropped down debt, paid by the world. What dost thou owe me? God might question. Now instead, 'tis God shall repay, I am safer so. He entered the city as a hero amidst great rejoicings and honor. He is leaving as a disgraced prisoner in great humiliation and insult. In triumphs, people have dropped down dead. Dropped down dead, alliteration. This line means that many leaders have died in victory as heroes. In his case, he is disowned by the world. But he believes that his imperfection will bring him closer to God. He feels that if he had died a year ago as an admirable leader, God would not have cared for him. As he was not acknowledged by the people, he is certain to be rewarded in heaven. He feels safe in the bosom of God. The speaker is optimistic, a feature of most of Browning's poem. The poem leaves us with a feeling of deep pathos as we ponder the fragility of fame. Strongly enough, there is no feeling of bitterness. It ends with Browning philosophy, God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. The poem has an ironic tone. The irony in the poem is that the people who had in the beginning welcomed the Patriot with flowers were the ones who hurled stones at him after a year. The poem begins with a retrospective tone, since the first two stanzas are in the past tense. The speaker recollects the days when he was welcomed with roses. Then there is tension in the narration when the speaker mentions that the rooftops are empty now. The speaker's tone becomes laced with agony when he notes how the people who apparently were ready to worship him are now cheering at his execution. The poem ends on an optimistic note as the Patriot believes that God truly knows who is moral or immoral. and He will do justice to him after his death. Thank you.